So rotation order is essentially the order that the gimbal works in order to move all three rotations. So if we look at this, I'm now in gimbal mode. So Control Shift right click, make sure this is in gimbal mode. This shows you the true rotations of the object. If I rotate the X axis, you'll notice that the Y and Z don't get affected. If I change the Y axis, you'll see that the X axis is affected, but the Z is left alone. If I move Z, everything moves together. That is rotation order. Which axes affect other axes? To see the rotation order when you don't have a tool or a rig set up for it, just go to the attribute editor and you should find it right here under the main object, rotation order. So you can see it is X, Y, Z. X, essentially you read it from left to right. X has no effect on anything, just itself. Y affects things to the left, which is X. So Y and X are affected. When you move Z, that affects all of them. Now, the problem, especially with arms, is that when you have a character that rotates their arms up like this, the typical rotation order is not set up for that rotation. It's set up for arms to go this way most of the time on rigs. If your character's arm is doing this, that's going to affect the rotation order and essentially do whoop, this, and you get gimbal lock. So let's say in this situation, I know that I'm going to be using a lot of rotate Y. That's going to be the main rotation I'm doing on my character. In this case, I'm going to get a ton of gimbal lock. So I want to change my rotation order in a way that the rotate Y either affects nothing or changes everything together, just like the X here or the Z. So it should be either first or last. Essentially, the other thing to keep in mind is the rotation that you use least. So let's say I know that my rotate Z is not going to be used at all. That's the one you want to be in the middle, because that's the one that's going to give you gimbal lock. So in this case, I know Y is going to be probably one of the most important, and I know Z is going to be the one I use the least. So I want either a YZX or an XZY rotation order. Let's switch it to XZY. So now if I rotate this, X works on its own, Y moves the whole thing, and Z, which I'm barely going to use, I'm just going to maybe get a little wiggle like this, is never going to give me gimbal lock. So this is the ideal way of avoiding gimbal lock and keeping things so that you're not copying over on multiple controls. So it can get tricky, and this is where tools can help because they'll help snap things into place afterwards. But as long as you keep in mind that you want the rotation that you use the least to be in the middle, you should be good. Now, to actually key this, all you need to do is right click on here and hit key or set key right there. But what if I have a lot of Y and Z rotation at the same time, separate on two controls? So if you have a lot of Y and Z at the same time, and you're not using too much X, you'd put X in the middle. So let's say we'll put it ZXY. So now Z moves on its own, Y moves the whole thing, X doesn't really do too much. You're not going to get gimbal lock. So you could try it that way. Now, if it's always switching, so you have a character doing a motion, but then later in the shot, they do another motion and it's going to then cause gimbal lock there, you can key it halfway through, mid-shot. So maybe the first section of the shot, the character is doing a lot of these motions. So I need, we'll just say, for sake of argument, I need the Z axis to be my main axis. Okay, I'll put it so it's ZXY. But then later on, the character is doing this motion a lot, and the Z axis is going to kill me with gimbal lock. It's just going to be a nightmare. Well, then as the character's arm moves down, I switch it, just like an FK-IK switch. So now the Z axis is in the middle. So I get X, Z, Y. And now I'm not going to have too many issues. It's tricky and it's complicated when you're first starting to practice with it, but it can be really, really helpful. The other thing you can do is you can create an attribute that allows you to switch it a little bit more easily in here, but that's extra work. And I would just go in the attribute editor for the amount of times I use it. In most cases, I would just go in here and then right click, key selected, or set key right there.